And like most people, when they're building a career, I was working like a maniac. But I sort of stepped back and said, in my mind, I was the most boring person that I knew because all I was doing was working. And the danger of that is so many people define themselves by what they do as opposed to maybe who they are, right?
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
All right, we are live from Laguna Beach, California today from the Ben Reinberg I Own It studios. And we have our mystery guest coming on today. I think you're going to be pretty excited about. He's a publishing executive, a successful author, a photographer, a philanthropist, and so much more. Michael Clinton, welcome to the I Own It show. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us on a Friday. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ben. I'm glad to be here with you and look forward to our conversation.
So let's kick things off. Share more for our audience. I understand who you are, but a little bit about your career and like where you started and where you are today. It's pretty impressive. You know, you've been an icon in the publication industry, and I want our audience to really understand who exactly your background is and your success in your career.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I was in the magazine publishing business for 40 years, and my first big job was as the publisher of GQ, which was a great experience to have. I then went on to be the senior vice president and executive vice president of Condé Nast. I then went over to Esquire and Hearst, and ultimately all of their publications. I most recently was the president and publishing director of the company. 25 magazine brands, print, digital, social. I was fortunate to be able to launch Oprah Winfrey's magazine with our team, most successful magazine launch in history. We launched Food Network magazine and HGTV. We have Elle and Harper's Bazaar and House Beautiful and Car and Driver and Esquire and on and on and on. And I was also the chairman of the Magazine Publishers of America. So I had a great, amazing, publishing life, top of my game, which was great for a kid who went to New York from Pittsburgh with $60 in his pocket and no contacts, and worked my way up into the system. So yeah, it was that's a quick snapshot of my background.
What's it like now? Obviously, in the digital age with publications, how has it impacted magazines? I mean, are people, I get sent to my office and house, all these different publications, and I just don't have time to read them, Michael, because I'm inundated with traveling and running my company and thousands of emails and hundreds of texts. And now I'm on social media. What's going on in the magazine business now, the publication business you see, and the transformation that's gone on a long time ago to make it more digital?
Yeah, no, the transformation is well on its way. I mean, we still have a lot of print products that are very profitable and have great audiences. Certain subjects lend themselves well to print. So things like home design. We have Veranda, Elle Decor. I mentioned House Beautiful. Fashion magazines, rich, lush pages. We have Elle, Harper's Bazaar. Women want to really see the product, the fashion in the pages. So those kinds of magazines continue to thrive and do well in print. And by the way, we also have lots of digital extensions on those brands too. So their websites, their social media handles, we're on every conceivable social media platform. The magazine industry has traditionally had two sources of revenue. Advertising revenue is the primary one, and then circulation revenue. But what's happened now is we have lots of e-commerce revenue and affiliate revenues and brand development revenues. I'll give you an example. We have a magazine called Good Housekeeping, and everyone knows the Good Housekeeping Institute and the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval. And we do a huge amount of business through e-commerce, of which we get an affiliate fee. We don't carry inventory, but we have an affiliate relationship with all of the big guys. And that's an enormous new line of revenue, just as another example. So the digital revenues, whether it's through our digital advertising or e-commerce, et cetera, have really continued to grow double digit year on year on year. And, the print business, which we'll I think will be around for a really long time. It'll be a smaller business. It won't be, there won't be as many magazines and the circulations won't be as high, but there are still a lot of consumers who like to have that high touch experience. So we want to be everywhere where the consumer is and satisfy all of their interests, regardless of their platform interests.
So I find it really interesting, Michael, that you have so many creative outlets like writing, photography, exploratory travel, while also being a business executive for several decades. I rarely encounter people who are so comfortable to pursue both these worlds at the same time. I am busy all the time. What's your secret? Like, how do you do it? Because a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners and folks out there want to know, like, how does a guy like you do that when you're so busy?
So I'll give you the aha moment. I was about 39 years old. I was the publisher of GQ, had been for 5 years. I was the youngest publisher in the industry when I first got the job. And like most people, when they're building a career, I was working like a maniac. I had a great personal life, great love life, family life, all the above. So check the box. But I sort of stepped back and said, in my mind, I was the most boring person that I knew because all I was doing was working. And the danger of that is so many people define themselves by what they do as opposed to maybe who they are, right? And I was in that trap. I was defining myself as the publisher of GQ, realizing at a moment that seat will go away someday, and that as most professional seats do, unless your name is on the door. And so I made a decision when I was turning 40 I have an adventure gene in me. So I decided I was going to do three things. I was going to take a flying lesson because I'd always been interested in flying. I was going to go to Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa with a group of friends and hike to the top of Kilimanjaro. And I was going to take a race car driving class. And I thought, classic 40-year-old kind of, the kind of stuff I'm going to do. Anyway, I fell in love with flying. I became a private pilot. I've ultimately hiked a lot of mountains all over the world and climbed and so forth. But I made this proclamation that my 40s were going to become my adventure years. So I built what I call a layer that was outside of my personal life and my professional life, meaning I call it the 3 Ps: parenting, partnering, and professional. All important things, but let's put them over on the side. I was going to build out this layer of adventure travel and adventure experiences. And, I've now been doing that since I was 40. And so I like this concept of layering. So, I added another layer around photography and writing. I put another layer in around philanthropy, which you mentioned earlier. So now I've got all these layers. So when I stepped out of my day-to-day job as the president and publishing director of a big, huge media company, I didn't go off the cliff. A lot of people go off the cliff, right? They get lost because they've lost their identity. I had all these other layers that I had already created that I was able to lean into to build out a set of personas for myself that weren't tied into just being my professional seat. By the way, kids grow up and go away. And, also hopefully your partner sticks around, that, stuff happens on that front too. So you got to build out your layers for yourself. And that was what I ultimately learned, which is why I ended up writing a book called Roar, is that this life layering construct, it's easy to do. You just have to focus on it. It's a good formula for creating a multidimensional life. That's the simple answer, Ben.
Well, it's a great answer. And let's talk about GQ, because I believe you started at GQ and you still write about men's fashion from time to time. What is it that drew you to the fashion world? I know it's part of Hearst Publications, but how do you view the men's fashion industry to have changed over the course of your career?
Well, first of all, I think what I should say up front is I was never really interested in the fashion industry. Mm-hmm. I was really interested in the publishing industry. And it just so happened that I ended up getting my first big, meaningful job at GQ, which happened to be around that subject. I didn't go in as the publisher. I ultimately was promoted to the publisher's job, of which I held for 7 years. So I was less interested in fashion per se and more interested in publishing. But what I think, as an observer, what I think has happened is, men in general have become much more comfortable with personal expression. Once upon a time, the story, the man in the gray flannel suit, men basically walked around in uniforms and they didn't have much, expressiveness around their appearance, their fashion, their grooming, their wellness. And, the biggest trend has been that men now are very comfortable in all of those areas. And I think that that's great, because I think what happens is that it lets men be expressive about the way they want to dress, the way they want to groom, the way they want to be fit. And that's liberating. And so I would say that's the biggest thing I have observed over the evolution of, being in a publishing world that serves that consumer. That would be my biggest comment that I would make on that front.
Yeah, I remember going to work. I used to wear 3-piece suits and suits all the time and ties. I still have a closet full of tons of suits. And now I'm a little bit more casual, maybe a sport jacket. It's a little bit more sporty and casual, but it's where our society has gone. Now that I live out in California, people are really casual out here compared to Chicago or New York. Yeah. What was your favorite part about running all these magazines, and how did you manage your time to be in charge of publishing for so many magazines under that portfolio?
It's all about the people that you assemble and creating the team. And I was very fortunate, and all the publishers that I hired, I really got to have the cream of the crop. We were, a big company, and I was able to really tap into great talent. And, I think it's really important I would always say to them, I'm the orchestra leader, but you're the experts in your respective instrument, your respective knowledge of your particular business, because we had many, many different businesses. So obviously Good Housekeeping was very different than Harper's Bazaar. And the publishers on each of those titles had to have knowledge and experience there. And, as a senior executive, I wanted to empower my people. I wanted to support them. We always had great, transparency and honesty, and understood what the collective goals were. And, a great orchestra leader has all the players, playing in a spectacular, orchestrated way. And I think the key thing for managing so many properties and such complication is to not micromanage, to really make sure you're setting the tone, you're setting the examples, you're setting the strategy, and you're letting people fly on their own. And, I think that is, while I was always aware it was going on, I wasn't deep in the weeds. I let people run their own show. And that is a big, important, I think, element to managing complex organizations. And especially when you're in an industry, as I was, this was going through a major transformation into the digital world.
Let's get into that a little bit. How did the economics of a magazine work? And what are the key levers you had to pull to increase sales, Michael?
Yeah, well, the number one was always advertising revenue, right? And get the advertisers who wanted to speak to the consumers who were buying the magazines on the website and so forth. So advertising revenue was always the number one and continues to be the number one revenue source. And, all things, lead to revenue first, right? To build a business. And then the second big revenue source was the consumer revenue. That's, you or whomever paying for a subscription or a bundled subscription or, anything else that we're offering. Those are really the two, and continue to be the two main sources of revenue. I mentioned e-commerce. We have event revenue, we have sponsorship revenues, things of that nature. But it's a fairly simple economic model. But the good news is that it's diversified quite dramatically from what was once only a 2-lane set of revenues to now multiple lanes of revenue. So that has helped the overall business.
And so to decide on which brand deserved more investment, or you're going to double down, was it just a revenue decision, or were there other decisions that came into play to say, okay, we're going to spend more money in this particular arena of the umbrella?
Yeah, no, good question. It all depended on the upside in terms of expanding. and growing. Part of it was startup, like Food Network magazine, which was entering what was at the time a very crowded space. But obviously, with the collaboration we had with the Food Network itself, it had great brand equities. So we made obviously a very big investment. It paid off very quickly. The launch of Food Network magazine was an amazing launch and very successful out of the gate. If we took a more established brand like Esquire and decided that we saw upside for Esquire in other areas, we launched something called the Esquire Big Black Book, which was a brand extension, which created more revenue opportunities and on all fronts. And so we would place our bets where we saw growth and where we saw upside. And at the same time, we would sunset brands that we felt were no longer relevant. So a magazine like Redbook, which somebody might remember from their youth, we sunset that magazine because we didn't see, a big future in it. So, you make the right decisions based on what you see in the marketplace.
And I agree with you. In commercial real estate, we do the same thing. We're one of the leaders in owning medical properties throughout the United States, which we believed in 20 years ago when it was not as recognized as it is today, because the human body is never going out of style and it's pandemic and recession resilient real estate. But we put other assets dormant, whether it be retail. Retail's changed drastically in our country. As you probably know, with magazine sales, the whole world's changed with the digital world we're living with. And so I wanted to ask you, let's talk about your book, Roar. And what a great book. And I am 53. I'm going to be 54 soon. So it's kind of right up my alley and my generation. And it's a fascinating premise to me. And you touched on it a little bit earlier, and it's inspiring people 50 plus years old to think bigger about their future. Share the story of what's behind the book, what inspired you, what has been the response to the book, and then what are some of your favorite anecdotes that come from the book?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think what inspired the book is I was thinking about stepping out of the day-to-day of my work. I was kind of looking around to see what was happening. I surely didn't want to, the idea of retiring I would submit is an old concept. It was created in the 1930s when the retirement age was pegged at 65 because of Social Security. What people didn't realize that the average life expectancy in those days was 62. So, you basically were, to be quite blunt, dead in a few years. So, a lot of people didn't even make it to 65 in those days.
All right.
Well, today, if you're 60 and healthy or 50 and healthy, you're going to probably live to be 90 and maybe 100. And there is, we call this, and what is in the culture now is called the new longevity. All of a sudden, people are realizing when they're 50 or 53 or 60, wow, this construct that I was handed is no longer relevant. It's been disrupted by longer lives. And so if I'm 60, I have 30 more years. Playing golf and hanging out with the kids is not going to sustain you for 30 years. Let's assume you're healthy and you're taking care of yourself. So it creates an opportunity for someone to work longer, launch a new career, be an entrepreneur, go back to school, get on a fitness regimen, have a new relationship and marriage, have a new family. It is the gift of another 30 years that people who are 50-ish plus are having that our parents and grandparents didn't necessarily have. And that gift is incumbent upon all of us to say, how do we make it meaningful and purposeful? And, that was what sparked the idea of the book. And to find the people that I say are writing the new script of what it's like to be over 50 today. And, I always say to people, look around you and look at all these amazing people that you see here, 55 and 65 and 75 are doing incredible things that are breaking through the stereotype of what it would mean to be that age. So to answer your question, the book hit. It was a great hit. We're in our third printing. I was all over the airwaves. I was asked to give lots of speeches, which I continue to do. We've launched a business around it, a newsletter, all the above. People can go to roarforward.com and see what we're up to, sign up for our newsletter. But I think what I learned, Ben, is that, right now, third of the country, 35% of the country is already over 50. And in 2030, the first millennials turn 50. So you have this huge cohort of people that are all over 50 that are beginning to look around and say, wait a minute, I still got a lot of drive and interest and ambition in me. The whole country is going through this 50 plus process in a big way. And by the way, it's a global phenomenon as well. So this new longevity is creating a whole new set of attitudes and behaviors and interests. And that's what Roar was all about, is really putting a spotlight on that. Long answer to your question.
Well, it's a great answer, because it's interesting. We did an exercise with my leadership team. We said, so the average lifespan is 77, say, and we said, okay, well, if you take me as example, 53, we said 77 minus 53 times amount of weeks in a year, that's how much you have left. And so then you realize, okay, how am I going to spend my time with, and time is everything. In for everyone, it's the most valuable asset you have. And so then we looked at a younger employee who maybe was 25 or 30 years old, and they have double what I have. And so the decisions are different. Your decision process is different on your decision tree of, what a 50 plus year old would do compared to a 20 plus 30-year-old. And it's interesting now that people are living longer, they're making a little bit different decisions, maybe taking a little bit more risks, maybe investing in different parts of your life. Like you said, starting a new family, having kids at an older age. We're starting to see that as well. And I've never heard that line before, reimagine. Okay. What exactly does that mean? And how do you think about it in terms of your life and the people that you look to inspire?
So the word Roar, the book, into the second half of your life, is an acronym. So the R is reimagine, which I'll answer that question in a moment. The O is own your numbers. You have to own your health numbers and your financial numbers, and you have to own your age. You have to be pro-age about yourself, because there's a lot of science that says if you're positive about aging, you add 7.5 years to your life. And, that is, there's a great book called Breaking the Age Code, which talks about the psychology that we all have. If we're mentally positive about aging in the right way, we can extend our lives. And that's a great finding. The A is the action plan, which is really around the life layering thing and other things that we talked about. And then the R is the reassessment of your relationships, which I'll touch on because it ties into reimagine. The big and interesting thing now is, as people are realizing that they are going to live into their 80s and maybe 90, is they've begun to rethink exactly what you said. Wow, I have a sort of a limited amount of time, but I have a lot of time. And so how do I really optimize the kinds of things that are important to me? And when you open yourself up to say, I'm not going to be living in self-imposed ageism and saying when I'm 50 or 60, well, I can't do that, or the ship has sailed, or I'm too late, I'm too old for that. When you get rid of that, it opens up a lot of opportunity. And one of the areas, which is lifelong learning, is this, enormous amount of, I'll call it adult education that's happening in the world, where you can get a badge, a certificate, a degree if you want, and spin into a new place. When I was in my 60s, I decided to go back to get a second master's degree at Columbia University on nonprofit philanthropy. And, being a student again at 64, I can only tell you was, challenging, but it was an amazing, amazing experience. And most people would say, well, I may not be able to relearn or reschool or reskill. And it's just not true. You have to open yourself up to it. So the 40 people that I interviewed in this book, we call them the Reimagineers. They are people who did all of this. An amazing 53-year-old woman who was a writer, had studied English in college. She decided when she was 53 that she wanted to become a medical doctor. You know how challenging it is for a 23-year-old to go through that process. But she tells her story about how she made the decision, how she found a path, how she found money and scholarships to pay for the entire experience, and how she became a doctor in her early 60s. And her attitude was, I can become a doctor at 62 and I can be a doctor for 20 or 25 years, and make a major contribution to the world around me. And so that was breaking through sort of some ageist thinking to say, well, at 53, I really can't do something like that. I mean, to me, that was a great inspirational story that she had to waken herself up. Another fellow that I interviewed was on Wall Street. He studied finance, interesting. He got an MBA, he went to work on Wall Street. And in his late 40s and early 50s, he was really unhappy. He realized how unhappy he was in his profession. And he had always wanted to be a teacher. And he always wanted to be a teacher of kids in disenfranchised communities and neighborhoods and so forth. And, fortunately he had a working wife. So there were two streams of income. And she supported him. And he went back to school and got a degree in a master's degree in education, and went into the inner city in New York City, mostly in Harlem, schools in Harlem, and became a math teacher in some of the most underprivileged schools in the New York City public school system. Absolutely was in heaven. He said he found his soul and his niche that he always felt he should have been doing. So a pivot, a career pivot that really began to focus on something that had meaning for him, that he had always wanted to do, but thought maybe he was just going to be on the path he was on. But, you have to have the courage. So reimagining is, how do you have the courage to reimagine what a different kind of future can look like on any front of your life? And, that takes, introspection. And we've got some great tools in the book in terms of how you can do it. But it's really creating a different mindset.
And it's really looking at yourself and saying, what do I want my mission to be in life? And right. Where am I going to find that love? And what you touched on last hour is reassess your relationships. It's not reassessing your outside relationships. It's really your relationship with yourself. Who do you want to be? How do you love yourself? It's one of the journeys I've been on for years, is personal growth. And I encourage everyone out there listening is keep growing, keep learning. Learn about yourself and take chances. You only get one life. Right. And the book is so well written and touches on so many great points. And that story about the math teacher is so inspirational. What a great story that is, of someone that's successful says, hey, I'm just going to pivot and change my life and my trajectory of who I want to be and I want to become. I'm sure he's extremely grateful. Must be very gratifying for him as he moves forward in life. And let's touch on, so you talked about philanthropy, and you're the founder of Circle of Generosity, a foundation that grants random acts of kindness to people in need, which I think is incredible that you do this. Just explain, how did this come about, and what was your inspiration to do this? And are there any other ventures like this that you're partaking in as well?
Well, I've always believed in giving back. I think it's an important part of our human experience and condition. And I also think it's very ingrained in the American DNA and the American psyche. I mean, from way back in the beginning of the early settlers, in terms of how in those days, churches were, center for community and giving back and service. And I think service is really critical for all of us in however way we want to do it and interpret it. So I've always had that as a part of my life. And, I'm a big traveler. I mentioned I'm an adventurer, and I would be in, places in Africa and Madagascar or in Southeast Asia or wherever. And I would always try to help the local community in some way when I saw perhaps there were, a women's collective working on creating crafts or handicrafts. I would make a, financial donation to them or whatever, ad hoc. But I thought there must be a more formalized way to do this. So about 12 years ago, we created Circle of Generosity. And our goal was to, as you say, grant random acts of kindness to people and families in need. And what we really focus on are giving grants to people who are really finding themselves in a really difficult position. So I'll give you an example, a grant we just made. We found a woman who had lost her job and wasn't able to afford her apartment anymore and was living in her car. And she was in a local park living in her car. And one of our board members met her and started chatting with her. She was 61 years old. And to make a very long story short, we helped her find housing. It was subsidized housing. We paid for the sort of, if you call it, entry fee. And then we paid 8 months of her rent so that she could have a place to live through the winter. She was working on getting a new job. She had a part-time job. So she was, we gave her a lifeline at a very difficult time in her life where she found herself living in a car. And this was, a woman who had been a middle-class woman. She was divorced. She was a quote unquote upstanding citizen, but she found herself in these this difficult circumstance. So it's a great example of kind of thing we do. During the pandemic, we focused a lot on food insecurity. There were a lot of people who were hungry, who were also middle-class people, not just, people in lower socioeconomic groups. And so we worked with food pantries and food kitchens, and we did a lot in the food insecurity front. We do a lot around disaster relief. If a family loses, everything, we might help them with things like we did some outreach in Lahaina and Hawaii, but literally getting people Home Depot cards and getting people Costco cards so they could buy clothes and they could have just basics because, as you know, they lost everything. So it's been very gratifying. We do it anonymously. It's the best way to give. It's been very gratifying to help people, individuals. We have a direct effect. And thank you for asking about Circle of Generosity. Your listeners can go online and see what we're all about as well. But so it's just a part of my philanthropy layer that I mentioned earlier.
Any other books coming out, new ventures you want to share? Anything on the horizon in the next 12 to 24 months we should be aware of with Michael Clinton?
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, as I mentioned, we launched a business around Roar. So I'm very excited about that. Mm-hmm. Once again, roarforward.com. And we have a consumer newsletter, which people can sign up for. It's a free newsletter. If they're interested in the subject of reimagining and, the new longevity, and we showcase reimagineers every month. And we do a lot of it's mostly a B2B, business to business. So we do a lot. We just have a big piece of research coming out. So we're going to keep building that and keep building our voice. I'm doing a lot of writing on the topic for Esquire and Men's Health and Oprah Daily, which you can see on the website. So my next year is going to be that. I'm going to continue my adventuring. This year, I went and did a 9-day hike to the Everest base camp and then ran a marathon down. So every year there's a big adventure on the docket.
Wait,
I run marathons.
Did you just say you ran a marathon down?
I did. Actually,
what was that?
Actually, it's not. It's a fallacy when I say down because it's really up and down.
Okay.
So when you hike to the base camp, you're hiking up, and then you're hiking down, and then you're hiking sideways, and then you're hiking up. So when you're coming down, you're doing the same thing. This is an annual event for your marathon listeners who want to really challenge themselves. It's called the Tenzing Hillary Everest Marathon, which happens once a year. And I've been wanting to do it for many years. And I was able to enlist 2 friends who went with me. And we had an amazing, life-changing, epic experience to, when I say going down, it's the marathon distance, but most of it was not runnable. Most of it, right. You were, climbing over rocks and using your poles to get past yaks and not falling off a cliff. But it was, quite the experience. So next year, we're going to go to Western Australia and hike into the Kimberley region. So when you create these life layers, you're always saying, okay, how am I going to fill in on the layer? So adventure travel, more philanthropy, more photography, more writing, my various layers. I tried to feed each layer every year to keep it rich and keep it going. So there will be another book that will come out of the Roar concept. We're not ready to talk about it yet, but we're doing a lot of great things to help people really understand the new longevity and what it's going to mean for them as individual people. And once again, the gift of so much more time to be able to use to do all the things that you may have put on the shelf or forgot to do or want to do.
So what's the best way for our audience to be engaged with you? You have a website, social media. How do people stay engaged with you? So when the new book comes out or any other content, or they want to get involved in the charity, what's the best way to stay engaged with you?
Well, roarforward.com says it all. So I would say, go there, sign up for our newsletter. There are ways that people can communicate with us to hear what we're up to. That's really, I would say, the best. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on, Facebook, and I'm on with my name and also with the Roar Forward name. So people can, plug in on LinkedIn if they're on LinkedIn, or the Roar Forward Facebook page, X now versus Twitter. I personally post a lot around this topic. Once again, through my name on Twitter, now X, that just covers this topic in general. So if you want to be a student of the new longevity and all of its implications, those are great places to go.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to wrap up with our 3 questions. I've been waiting for you to come on. I'm glad you're healthy now. He had a little bit of COVID a little bit ago, and now he's bright and healthy, which is great to see. All right. So in our studio in Laguna Beach, Michael, we have a couch. And I would say lay on the couch, kick off your shoes, close your eyes. And you are now 60, what?
My trip to Everest was to celebrate my 70th birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, you look fantastic for 70. We could do another show on forget about Roar, about health and what you're doing. You look absolutely spectacular for 70.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations.
This is what the new 70 can look like.
Wow.
If you want to do it. So you're 70 years old. Incredible. Go back to when you were 16 years old, and with all the knowledge and experience and go back and if you could talk to yourself, what advice would you give with all the knowledge you've obtained for the past 70 years? Well, as you and I talked offline, I came from a poor working class family that really had no money and no education and no opportunity. I think I had parents who built confidence in me and I had a grandmother who gave me a vision of life could be different. And I think that, follow that North Star that you create about your possibilities and the things that you may be able to do and experience. Be bold, take risks. Have courage, step out. You said it earlier, we all have a limited time, and it's incumbent of us individually to express what we want to do. And so I've been very fortunate in that I have lived a life thus far that is way beyond the expectations that I even had, as a young man. So become who you want to become is what I say.
So it's our last day on earth. God forbid. It's just me and you, Michael. It's our last meal together. Your choice. What are we eating and what are we drinking?
Well, first of all, we've got to have Mexican food just because it's got to be one of those big big feasts of, all kinds of great Mexican foods. Maybe we'll start with the tequila shot. After that. But some friends and I have a vineyard in Argentina. Another one of my little adventurous experiences, which was a serendipitous thing. And we grow Malbec and create Malbec.
I collect wine, so I love hearing this. This is great. So you guys are producing great Malbecs.
Exactly. And so we probably have to have some of our Malbec, which is actually not bad. So yeah, that's probably where I'd go. What's the name of the vineyard? Well, the master vineyard is called Vines of Mendoza. Okay. So it's quite an amazing conglomeration of what are private vineyard owners such as us. And it's got a great destination if people are interested in traveling to the Argentina wine country. But, you can go on divinesofmendoza.com and see it. It's it's a really pretty cool place.
Oh, that's great. So in our studio, Michael, we have a black door. And within our studio, we have a grand piano, a drum set, and electric and acoustical guitars. If you could have any band or musician, they could be living or deceased, walk through that black door and play us a song, who is it? Your choice. Who's coming through that black door and what song are they playing us?
Well, that's easy to answer because I've seen Sting in concert more than any other performer. So I'm a major Sting fan. I think talk about redefining what 70 can look like.
Yeah.
He's amazing as a performer and a human being and fit and all the things we know. So it'd have to be Sting. And of course, one of my favorite songs is An Englishman in New York. So I'd ask him to sing that for us.
Oh, that's a great song. Great answer. We haven't had anyone choose Sting yet, so I love that answer. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm glad to see you up on your feet and healthy. If you are interested in listening to more episodes of the Ben Reinberg I Own It show, kick that right-hand button and click subscribe. Feel free to click the like button as many times. And as we say out in the ether, let it go viral. To follow me, go to benreinberg.com. I am located on all the different social media platforms. And yes, kids, even TikTok. And if you are interested in commercial real estate, learning about commercial real estate and investing passively, and you're a high net worth accredited investor, look no further. Go to alliancecgc.com. Feel free to click on Invest with Us. Feel free to take a look at our brand new fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund. It is one of the hottest funds on the market in the United States. And let us show you how we can build wealth and a legacy for you and your family. Michael Clinton, thank you for joining us on the show today. Great to see you. And thanks again.
Thanks, Ben. Great talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.